Hi everyone, and welcome back to another social studies video. We are going to be continuing to work on question number 2 that geographers ask, and that is, what are the natural characteristics of a place? But this time we're going to move away from landforms and bodies of water, and we're going to talk about other big things like vegetation, climate, and things like that. So you are going to need your social studies packet today, as well as a pencil. So if you need to go and grab that, go ahead and pause the video so you can get it. All right, now that you have it, we can get started with the lesson. Okay, so again, we're continuing to talk about our natural characteristics with a focus on some big words that we're going to learn about today, and those words are vegetation and climate. So our objectives for today, we're going to continue to look at some thematic maps. Those aren't just regular maps we're used to seeing all the time, but they revolve around a theme, which we'll see in a little bit. And then we're going to be writing our important facts in our guided notes. Okay, the first new word we're going to learn about is called vegetation. Vegetation. Remember that T-I-O-N at the end of the word says shun, vegetation. So this is another example of a natural characteristic. And I want you to think to yourself, when I say vegetation, what does it sound like? So maybe you said vegetables. Well, that is because vegetation is a fancy word for what vegetables are, and that is plants. One type of vegetation that Michigan is very well known for is the forest. So let's take a look at some of the national forests. Those are forests taken care of by our national government. So we have 3 national forests. The Ottawa Forest and the Hiawatha Forests are in the Upper Peninsula. This yellow is the Huron and Manistee Forest, which is in the Lower Peninsula. So again, those forests are extremely important, so our national government takes care of those. But we have more forests than that. We also have some state forests. The yellow is the Copper Country. The orange is the Escanaba Forest. And remember, there was a river called the Escanaba River, which is so fun to say. The red is for Lake Superior Forest. The blue is the Mackinac Forest. The pink is Pere Marquette, and the gray is the Ausable, and there's also a river called the Ausable River. So these forests are protected by the state. Just so you know, the Upper Peninsula, as we can see in these maps, are pretty much all covered in forests. There are some cities, some big cities in northern Michigan in the Upper Peninsula, but really it's mostly forest. And Michigan has the largest state forest system of any state except Alaska. Alaska beats us with having the most state forests, but we're number 2, which is pretty cool. We also have some commercial forests. Commercial forests is forests that they use to harvest and sell trees. As you can see, it's mostly in the Upper Peninsula. They sell these trees for paper, lumber, or wood that you would use to build something like a desk or a dresser, and other tree products. And again, what do you notice about where our commercial forests are? And the thing is they are all found in the Upper Peninsula. So again, we're talking about the vegetation of Michigan. Vegetation is a fancy word for plants. The first thing Michigan's known for is the forests. The second vegetation that Michigan is known for is our apple orchards. Here you see a thematic map of the apple orchards in Michigan. Looking at the key of the map, it's split into colors. This light kind of pink means not a lot of apple orchards. And as the color gets darker, there's a lot more apple orchards in that section, or acres of orchards. So here is Wayne County right here, if you can see my mouse. We are in the light pink. That means we don't have many apple orchards near us. But as you can see, as we move west along this lake over here, this is Lake Michigan, H-O-M, if you're remembering your home song. That's where we really see a lot of apple orchards. So where we live, there are some, but not a lot of acres. It's really known for out west. So how does the location of orchards in Michigan differ for the location of the forests? So if you remember all those forests, those really were in the Upper Peninsula, most of them. The apple orchards really don't grow up in the Upper Peninsula as much as they do on the west side of the state. Then what might you conclude about the location of orchards and the Great Lakes? Well, the orchards really grow a lot right by Lake Michigan. But as you can see, here are the other Great Lakes, and we see a lot of apple orchards in those parts too, although those aren't Michigan. That's Canada and New York, I believe. All right, so that's the first word, vegetation. Those are plants, like apple orchards and forests. The other big word we're going to learn today is that of climate. Climate is another example of a natural characteristic, and that is a fancy schmancy word. I'm curious if you remember because we read a book about it. It's a fancy word for the weather. Now, climate is the weather over a long period of time. I wouldn't look outside for one day and go, I wonder what the climate is going to be today. The climate is what does the weather look like in Michigan over a long period of time. Now, you've studied this since kindergarten because the climate revolves around our seasons, and we have 4 seasons: fall, winter, spring, and summer. For us, the seasons all have very different weather patterns, as we know. Whereas in other places, it's hot all the time, or it's cold all the time. For us, because of our climate, our weather changes all the time based on the season. So geographers study the climate of a place by studying the different seasons of this place. And they also explore climate by studying the temperature and the precipitation of a place. So going back, the temperature is how hot or cold something is. So our summers have a high temperature, it's hot. The winters have a low temperature, it's cold. Precipitation is the water that comes out of the sky, pretty much. Rain, snow, sleet, things like that. So here's a thematic map of the temperature of Michigan. As you can see, in the Upper Peninsula, it is often much colder than it is in the Lower Peninsula. As we move south, the temperature gets warmer. And that's true because our Lower Peninsula is closer to the equator, which means it gets stronger sunlight. Now, this map talks about precipitation. Precipitation is rain and snow. So with this, the blue is the most precipitation. This is in inches. As it gets more white and then more brown, that's the drier area of Michigan. So you can see the west side of the Upper Peninsula and the west side of the Lower Peninsula get a lot more rain and snow than this northeastern part. That's because weather moves from west to east. So it hits here first after it travels over the Great Lakes, and then the rain kind of goes away as it travels east. The reason Michigan has the climate it has is because of our Great Lakes. Being near large bodies of water impacts how hot or cold it is and how much rain we get. The closer you are to water, usually the colder it is and the more temperature you get. We see this also because of all the hurricanes that happen around us. Those happen right along the coast because when the weather changes, when the wind changes and the temperature changes over water, we get things like a hurricane. We get bad things that can happen. When it happens over a lake, we call it lake effect. So the lake effect makes areas by the lake a little bit colder and a place where we get more precipitation. So let's jump into our notes. So in your social studies packet, please turn to page 11. We're going to kind of turn it on its side. And here we see a chart that's going to go through these new terms. If you need to pause the video to catch up at any time, please feel free to do so. In the center of our chart, we have natural characteristics in Michigan. We're answering question number 2 that geographers ask. What are the natural characteristics of a place? We've already talked about landforms, and we've already talked about bodies of water. Now we're focusing on the other 2 parts, vegetation and climate. Let's start with vegetation. Vegetation is a fancy schmancy word for plants. Oops, why? Oh, sorry about that. That's an N. I don't know why. I'm going to fix it so you can see it better. Plants. So vegetation means what plants grow in Michigan. There were 2 big types of vegetation that grow in Michigan. Do you remember what they are? They are forests and apple orchards. Michigan makes a lot of money selling wood that we grow in our forests, but don't worry, they've learned to plant new ones. And the apples that we can sell from apple orchards. So natural characteristics are landforms, bodies of water, vegetation, and climate. Do you remember what climate is a fancy schmancy word for? It's weather over a long, I'm struggling writing today, long period of time. So to determine the climate for a place, geographers look at the 4 seasons. Those 4 seasons are fall, winter, spring, and summer. Let's fill out some other vocabulary words. What word means how hot or cold the air is? Do you remember? That is temperature. How hot or cold the air is. The cold air that passes over warmer water is called the lake effect. And finally, the water that falls to the ground, such as rain, snow, hail, is precipitation. If you need to pause the video here to finish copying it down, go ahead. We've learned some really, really big words today, but we've looked at maps to help us understand them better. We're going to continue to use these words, so if you're still having trouble with them, don't worry. We'll keep practicing, okay? All right, bye.